G'day, I'm Mark from Self-Sufficient Me, and my dog-proof fence for my free-range chicken area is about 3 weeks old now, and I'm extremely happy with how it's turned out. The fence is almost exactly 200 metres in perimeter. It's got 57 posts which are 2.4 metres high by 100 by 75 mil in width. It's got a rubble rock trench base to make it very difficult for dogs to dig under, 142 centimetres high by 2.5 mil thick heavy duty galvanised dog mesh with a 2.6 metre wide and 1.5 metre high welded alloy gate, which is that behind me. And this gives my hens and ducks almost a whole acre of land to free range every day. For years we've had to put up with wild dogs and neighbours' dogs pushing it through our boundary fence line and attacking my chickens and ducks. Now though I have a dog-proof pen for my hens, the problem has been protecting my birds when they are left out to free range until now. Now, I'm no builder or professional fencing guy. In fact, this is the first ever proper fence I've made. And whilst it may not be perfect or even conventional in the eyes of the pros, I can say that it does the job and it looks pretty good. So if I can build a 200 metre dog-proof fence for my chickens completely on my own, then I believe anyone can. So in this video I'm going to show you step by step how I built my first dog-proof fence. I'm going to share with you all the lessons I've learnt along the way and give you some of my cost-effective solutions to issues I've come across. Now the steps. I've broken the building of my fence into 5 steps. Number 1, marking out the fence line and digging the trench. Number 2, digging the post holes. Number 3, putting the posts in the holes. 4, filling the trench with rubble rock. And 5, tacking the wire or dog mesh fencing onto the posts and putting on the gate. So let's go through them in those steps. Step 1, marking out the fence line and digging the trench. The first thing I needed to do was survey where exactly I wanted my fence to go. Since I have a lot of trees on my property, I needed to place each line so it had a relatively clear passage. I also wanted to include a few special areas that my chickens always like to go, like our big hollow tree. I wanted to include that within the boundary. Once I was happy with my roughly placed out line, I used builder's string between 2 marker posts to get a straight line for each side, and then I marked it with marker spray paint. I also tentatively marked where the posts would go at about 5 paces or 5 metres apart. Then I started the arduous job of digging a shallow trench, only 4 to 6 inches deep, the whole way around that perimeter. Now this trench was to hold my rubble rock, which would deter dogs from digging under the fence. I was using a large shovel and pick or a hoe, but I ended up getting a guy on a mini digger to scrape the fence line for me using a 400mm bucket attachment. And that was a hell of a lot easier on my hands. Step 2, digging the post holes. After completing the trench, I marked out where each post would go by pacing out 5 large steps, so about 5 metres apart. I wanted the posts to be pretty close together so that the fence would be even more robust. So rather than have 7 or 10 metres between a post, I've come down to 5, and that worked really well. So I'm a glutton for physical work, as you guys probably know if you've followed me. And I hate spending money hiring equipment, so I initially used a manual post hole digger to dig the first 20 or so holes. After that, and knowing I nearly had 40 more to go, I caved in and hired a motorised post hole digger to save some time and my upper body. I tell you what, that was hard yakka. The holes I dug were 600mm deep and 200mm wide. Not all holes went to plan due to large tree roots, etc. So I needed to move some holes slightly to get a good dig rather than use my time and energy cutting through the tree roots. Step 3, putting the posts in the holes. The posts I used were treated pine. They call it a H4 quality, which means they can be buried. As I said, they're 2.4 metres long, giving me 1.8 metres above the ground, and the widths were 100 by 75 mil. So it's a fairly robust post. I used 1 bag of rapid set postcrete or concrete for each post, and that worked well in that sized hole for those widths and diameters. Firstly, I cemented the 2 end posts in, and then I restrung a string line between those posts to use as a guide so that I could ensure the rest of the posts were as straight or in line as possible. And not every post either ended up perfectly in line. Some were a few inches out here and there, but look, it's just a chicken fence. You know, it's not like it's my front fence outside my house for display on the street or anything. So the sequence I did for my posts in correlation to the way the manufacturer said that should be done was I put the post in first, small amount of water, half a bag of rapid set concrete. I ensured the post was level. I poured the rest of the postcrete into the hole evenly. I added the rest of the water, rechecked the level. That was done, moved on to the next post. So each post probably took me 5 or 6 minutes. Step 4, filling the trench with rubble rock. Now when I was brainstorming what materials to use to stop dogs from digging under my fence, I pondered lots of different options like a thick mesh dug down a foot or two, a mesh skirt on top of the ground coming out from the bottom of the fence. I've got this method on my pen behind me here, and it works well. I also thought about an underground concrete barrier the whole way around, but for the cost and labour purposes, I came up with the idea of using rubble rock. And I've used rubble rock before to make paths through boggy ground, and it's worked really well. It sets really hard, and the rocks are really robust. So rubble rock is what they use on building sites as a foundation material or as a fill-on boggy work sites to enable stable footing for trucks to drive over, etc. The rocks are different sizes. They're jagged and heavy, so difficult for a dog to dig out or through. Also, rubble rock is cheap. At $38 a trail load, and it also spreads a long way. So I got about 50 metres of trench coverage out of a trail load of rubble rock, which is pretty good. For extra strength, I decided to trial using some rapid set concrete as a way to bind the rocks together and make them even harder to move, and this idea worked really well. The rocks would be laid down first, and then the cement powder, similar to the stuff that used in the post holes, in fact exactly the same stuff, would be poured over the top of the rocks. I used about half a bag or so between each 5 metres of post, so it worked out to be about $3.50 to cement the rocks in. And then I used a small brush to brush, like a dustbin brush, to brush the cement into the cracks before spraying or pouring a small amount of water over the rocks to set the cement. This worked a treat, and it set the rocks really hard, and you couldn't move them and nothing was going to dig them out. Nevertheless, I decided to give the cementing of the rubble rock trench a miss because it became obvious to me that with my type of soil, which is heavy clay and with the dirt blowing in and heavy rain, the rocks would set themselves into the ground, and then grass would eventually grow over, making the rock trench hard enough anyway without wasting extra money on cement. But if I was in a softer soil situation, I probably would have cemented the rocks in the whole way around. The other very important point or lesson learned was when to fill the trench. Is it best done before putting the wire on or after? Initially, I filled the trench for my back fence line with rubble rock before installing the wire mesh. because without the wire it was easier to lay the rocks without the wire in the way. However, later I realised it was better to place the wire on first, because then the wire could be fixed down into the trench slightly below ground level, and subsequently when the rocks were poured into the trench, it covered the bottom of the wire mesh, making it even harder for a dog to dig or try to squeeze under. So for the rest of the sides, I installed the wire first and then backfilled the trench with rubble rock. Now step 5, tacking the wire or dog mesh fencing onto the posts and installing the gate. When it comes to installing the wire mesh fence, one thing to remember is the posts need to be set before you go ahead putting any wire on there. That means leaving the concrete that the posts are set into dry for at least 24 hours or even 72 hours by manufacturer's specs. That's to give it maximum strength. Also, because the wire mesh needs to be strained tight, it's a good idea to brace the corner posts, particularly the ones under the initial pulling pressure, so they don't pull over or lean over. I did this by using a 1.8 metre long split pine log, where needed, secured to the post with some galvanised nails and held into place with a 40 centimetre star picket hammered into the ground on a slight angle. Then I secured the wire mesh onto one post and unravelled the roll of wire all the way down the fence line until I got to the last post. It's important to note that when you have a large roll of wire, it can be very heavy. Now 100 metres of wire, especially at 1.42 centimetres high, really needs 2 or 3 men. So to get away from that and to get around it, I used a trolley jack for my rear fence because I needed to roll out at least 80 metres of wire. And that was good enough to move that wire around. Still had heavy hard work, but it got the job done safer than me trying to physically manhandle it. For the rest of my sides, I pre-cut the wire mesh so that I wouldn't have so much wire to roll out, and this made the job easier. Now back to straining the wire to get it tight. For the fence to look good and moreover be tight to prevent dogs from simply pushing underneath the fence, it needs to be pulled tight between the posts. This cannot be achieved by human strength. It's just not going to happen. A wire mesh for dogs is made up of many strands of wire. Therefore, pulling the top strand or bottom won't work either. I found the best way was to use a hand winch, or you could use a vehicle winch. Once I had rolled the wire out to the corresponding side, I then extended past the last post about 1 metre. This gave me enough room to cut the mesh and tie the loose end off to the half log or a free post. Then I used my hand winch to pull the free log, which gave an even pull on the mesh through each strand until it was tight enough. Do not over tighten at this point. The wire mesh is tight enough when you cannot bend it with your fingers. There's no need to super tighten the mesh or you'll just break something. Once the wire mesh is tight enough, then start from the far end and tack the mesh onto the post with those U-nails on each run down each post. When the wire mesh is tacked onto the last post, loosen off the tension from the winch, remove the half log or tree or free post and tie off the mesh to the post, the last post, and then restart the process from the next side. The gate was pretty simple to do. It was just a matter of getting it cut to size because I put my post in first. Of course, if you had a pre-sized gate, you'd have your post put in those measurements, allowing for the hinges. But essentially, I just got it cut to size. I needed it a width so I could get my vehicle through in case I had to do maintenance down here, get my ute down here in a trailer. You can get these kits, the hinge kits and the gate lock and all that. It's all fine, it's all pretty easy to do. I just found that probably the only issue I had was my posts weren't wide enough. So you could put in wider posts for a gate to fit the hinges on for this size gate, or you could just do what I did and just screw on a couple of extra pieces of wood to allow for the hinge joints to attach on and then the gate to swing freely. All in all, it was only $98 or something for the gate, so I was pretty happy with that. But it's good, works well. So in conclusion, I have a little automatic chicken door which I will be installing on my pen soon. It will open at about 9 AM every morning so the birds can let themselves out and safely free range all day. Then the door will close on dark after the hens have put themselves to bed. The fact that my chickens and ducks can safely free range without my constant supervision is a real comfort, and I can leave my property now without rounding up the birds and putting them back in their pen with the confidence in knowing they'll be fine in their dog-proof free-ranging paddock whilst I'm out. If you have any questions, I'd prefer to chat on our forum, selfsufficientculture.com, and I've created a thread especially for this fence, so join up. I've also written an article on our blog, selfsufficientme.com, which gives a breakdown of materials and costs. If you'd like to know more information, feel free to get on our forum, read the blog, leave a comment, whatever. That'd be great. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.